no, I think that the California Water Commission is getting really unfairly, hammered here. The spending of the funds for water storage is very limited by the words in the legislation. It's a very complicated formula, and they're just, the Water Commission is following what the legislation told them to do, and they did not reject those projects. They said that, the funding that they're requesting, they needed more information for them to back up the claims that they were making on their projects. So they're not dead in the water. I think that the papers are overstating that. But also this idea, these, state legislators deliver a petition to the Water Commission telling them that they should fund sites and temperate flat reservoirs with this money. Then that's not how it was supposed to go down. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to, these projects are supposed to compete, and there's a lot of worthy projects in the mix, not just necessarily sites and temperance flat. So, the Water Commission has to follow what the legislators handed them, but they're really getting hammered for it. It's kind of sad, but, onward we go. These proponents of these storage projects will be submitting more information to back up, their claims for benefits that they wish to be paid for. And I think that we will see the money eventually get spent. But, they can only do what the legislature told them to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I had read the other day some newspaper article. I don't have it with me, so I can't quote it exactly, but the reporter said something that they were like NATO, no action, talk only.
Yeah, and they've been criticized for not spending the money sooner, but there were some limitations on when they could. They couldn't even begin to consider it until December of 2016, and then they have this complicated formula, and there was a lot of paperwork that those project components had to produce. So it's just kind of a cumbersome process that they've been handed. I'm not sure they deserve all the criticism that they've been getting. Probably some. I mean, it's the government, right?
Yeah.
But, I think they've been a little unnecessarily hammered.
I think people sometimes get hyped up for situations and they throw their voice in things when they don't know the whole story. They just hear peripherals or get news from certain places and not get the whole full story. So, I mean, it happens every day in everything that you hear. So,
oh yeah,
I agree with you. So now I also heard that there's some anti-dam activists that were rallied in Sacramento to show opposition to the Nevada Irrigation Sentinel Reservoir. Yeah.
This is a reservoir, not very popular one. It's sort of in a remote area of the Sierra, and I mean they're actually the people putting forth. I think they want to build this dam there, and here's some water storage funds. So they tried to apply for it. They didn't get any funding for it. Even those dam proponents said, this project really doesn't qualify for this type of funding. But the people that don't want that dam want to make sure it's known.
Yeah,
it's one of the more unpopular dam projects. The other one is this project in semi-tropic water bank.
You think they'll have the same resistance?
Oh, they actually have even more. So there's numerous people showing up to protest that one. So, not all of these storage projects necessarily are worthy ones, but there are some really good ones in the mix. Yeah. So, we'll see what happens.
Well, I know earlier back when the drought was, San Joaquin, different subject, San Joaquin water users were cut off during the drought, and I guess they took it to an appellate court and won.
Yeah, this is going to have some implications. This is really what the issue really is, that these are very old senior water rights, and senior water rights have the most power in the water rights system. They generally get all their water before anybody else. and these are water rights pre-1914. You know, we had some water code written in 1914, and by that time a number of people had already established their uses of water, and so the legislature at that time just punted and said, okay, everyone before 1914, they just get all this water, and everybody after this are subject to all these regulations. So when we had the big drought and the water went very, very low, the State Water Board tried to go back to these people with these pre-1914 rights, and they tried to say, you have to be cut off, you can't divert. And they filed a lawsuit and said we didn't get due process, we didn't get a chance to challenge this, and the courts agreed. And, I mean, this is really a problem, and I think this is one of those overarching issues that we're going to have to deal with in the coming decades. We have very senior water rights, and, people are getting water, because they got here first, and people that aren't getting water include cities and, the environment and a lot of other farmers. And, as our hydrology changes, are we really going to be able to support these kinds of old agreements? I think there's going to be some reckoning going to have to happen here.
Yeah. It's not going to get pretty down the road.
Oh, no. As supplies get tighter, it just gets harder.
Yeah. Now, I know this has changed the subject for a second and not in California, but have you been keeping up or know anything about what's been happening in Cape Town?
I heard that they got to push it back a little bit because residents are conserving, but no, that's pretty ugly.
Yeah. There was an op-ed, a gentleman who was on our show, and a good friend named Seth Siegel, wrote a book called Let There Be Water, and I didn't get a chance to read the op-ed. I just got a note from him to go read it, and I was on my way here, so I didn't get a chance to do it. But he said it's more political than anybody knows, and had to do with differences between Israel and their relationship, South Africa's relationship with Iran. So I got a download. I didn't know if you had heard about that, or Ingi or anybody had read that. That was I didn't get a chance to read it, but it was a taunting and tempting thing to see when he sent it to me. So I'm going to check that out. But the good news I heard is that the winter storm is expected to drop several inches of snow up at the Sierra Nevada.
Yeah, we'll take all we can get.
Yep.
We need some more.
Always good.
Very, very dry.
Yep. I hope it. They said they already had like 6 or 7 inches the other day, and then they're expecting the same amount tonight through Friday.
Yeah, we're just far, far behind.
Yeah.
I mean, but let's be happy. We'll take it. We'll take anything at this point.
Do you think, with what you know and what you read, and same question for Ingi or Paul, we all read science things and hear different things from everybody. Is this just a cycle, and then in a couple of years it's going to go back where we'll have plenty of water, and then there'll be another cycle where we'll be plenty dry again? Or do we really not know, or do we not trust anybody who tells us these things?
Well, I think that the climate scientists are saying that this is kind of the way it's going to be. Really dry drought and really gushing wet seasons.
Yeah.
With
It's
probably
the new normal.
more.
It's the new normal.
Yeah, we go from the wettest year on record in some ways to the driest year on record.
Wow.
Some ways, it's. I think it's a changing hydrology.
Yeah. It's going to be different, I guess, and I guess we all have to adapt, and really, it makes one stop and think. Everybody just takes water. Well, I shouldn't say everybody. A lot of people take water for granted, and they just go through every single day not even thinking about it. But I guess everybody's really going to have to stop and think hard about the future, because even 5 years, 10 years is going to make a difference. So. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well,
and,
our next guest can weigh in on that. Works for a very large farm in the Central Valley, and they've done a lot of things to address these issues. So they're one of the people that is thinking about it, does recognize it, and they're doing some pretty exciting things. So,
excellent.
we'll look forward to that visit.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go to our break. Chris, I wanted to thank you for joining us tonight. You're more than welcome to stay on if you'd like. Ingy and Paul have a great guest, and we'll be back in a few minutes with the Water Zone, and so stand by.
Good evening.
Are you looking for a place to buy your landscape and gardening items? Come visit us at Site One Landscape Supply. We offer a large and quality selection of irrigation, landscape, and outdoor living products such as Toro's water-efficient precision nozzles. Site One Landscape Supply has over 30 locations right here in Southern California, and we are the largest national wholesale distributor of landscape supplies in the United States. Site One's knowledgeable and friendly staff is equipped to help you with all your landscape, irrigation, and outdoor living projects. Whether you're redoing your backyard into a drought-tolerant garden or creating a water-efficient landscape for your client, Site One has everything you need, including the latest in water-saving technologies, drought-tolerant plants for your yard, irrigation supplies, fertilizer and weed control products, landscape accessories, hardscape products, outdoor lighting, and much, much more. Visit SiteOne.com to find a store near you or stop by today. Site One. We are stronger together.
This is Brooke's yard, and Brooke loves spending time with her kids. What she doesn't love are the ugly bare spots in her lawn. That's why Brooke uses Scott's Easy Seed. Unlike seed alone, with proper care, Easy Seed's all-in-one growing solution grows grass anywhere. The first time, guaranteed. This is a Scott's yard. Pick up Scott's Easy Seed today.
Hey, well, welcome back to the Water Zone on this nice Thursday here in California. A little chilly. I think we're going to get some rain, at least what they tell us. But those burning questions that I always want to go to somebody who really knows is Ingy Bisconer and Paul McFadden. And guys, welcome to the show, and I'll turn it over to you for your guest.
Thank you.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you, Rob. I guess if we could predict the weather, we'd really be popular. I don't think we can do that, but we can bring. I think we can bring really good guests on our Water Zone show, and tonight is no different. We have, he's a ball of fire. It's Danny Royer. He's the Vice President of Technology at Bowles Farming, and welcome to the show, Danny.
And good evening. It's nice to join you.
Great. I heard Danny speak on a panel last week at the World Ag Expo in Tulare, and Paul and I thought that he'd be a great guest for tonight to revisit kind of the topic that he covered there, which is technology on the farm, what's hot and what's not. So without further ado, let me introduce Danny to our listening audience, and we'll dive into some questions and learn about what a high-tech farm in Central California is doing. So Danny has been working in specialty crop farming for about 10 years, and 2 years ago he joined the Bowles Farming Company team as the Vice President of Technology. And mind you, folks, that's not a common title in agriculture today, so it's very unique and innovative. So prior to Bowles, Danny worked in logistics and management roles for large vertically integrated agricultural operations in California's San Joaquin Valley. And prior to his professional career, Danny received a BS in Ag System Management from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So you're in good company, Danny, because Paul is also a Cal Poly alum. And so as the Vice President of Technology at Bowles Farming Company, Danny is responsible for researching and integrating technologies that have benefit to the farm. Danny focuses much of his attention on how technology is going to change how decisions are made and how the processes behind those decisions are executed. He's a firm believer in servant-style leadership, which we'll hear a little bit more about. And cultivating crops is what Danny focused on in the early part of his career, but today he's also very focused on cultivating the success of those around him. So Danny, tell us where you're from, what led you to a career in agriculture, and then a few words describing the history and significance of Bowles farming.
All right, yeah, so I'm from Merced, right in the kind of center of California, born and raised, other than my 5 years in San Luis Obispo for college. That's where I've spent all my time. Growing up, I don't have an ag background I just got into 4-H and FFA, and that kind of guided me to Cal Poly. And then after Cal Poly, I was really lucky to get connected to a large farmer in the Merced area, and they brought me on, and I got a lot of neat experiences in transplanting and harvesting operations at a large scale irrigation operations and projects. And from there, got to go work for some larger companies and do some more fun things that involved a lot of logistics. And in doing one of those jobs, I was actually out working as a service provider for Canon Michael, Bowles' CEO, and he was out flying a drone around, and I actually called him and said, "Hey, is that you?" And that conversation started me ending up working for Canon a few months later. So I have a really fun job, a really unique job. Like you said, there aren't very many vice presidents of technology out there in ag, but a lot of that has to do with kind of Bowles itself. Bowles Farming Company is a very unique farm. I thought the conversation prior to this was a great segue, because we are one of those farms that holds those really, really senior water rights. In fact, the original founders of Bowles Farming Company were Henry Miller and Charles Lux, and they built the Miller and Lux empire starting in the late 1850s. And they were kind of influential in water policy in the late 1800s in California. And some of the case law that they were involved with helped shape that pre-1914 policy. So we are one of those farmers that has the benefit of having those senior water rights. And a part of that, is that we feel we have a great responsibility to use that water as efficiently and as effectively as we can. So a lot of what I do in my job is focused on how we optimize use of our water. And again, I don't think that my role is anything new, really, though, when you look at Bowles Farming Company, the family, and the legacy that they have in California. So a little bit about me and a little bit about Bowles.
Danny, this is Paul McFadden. When you were growing up in Merced, obviously ag's all around you, a lot of permanent crops and row crops. What really, you said 4-H and FFA kind of drew you into the Cal Poly. Just curious, what was something that maybe triggered, and the folks that are listening tonight may be thinking along the same lines of how to take someone from a non-ag background and plug them in into obviously a very successful career.
In fourth grade, I went to soccer camp at Cal Poly, and I visited the campus in fourth grade. I got to visit some of the farm operations, fell in love, decided then that is exactly where I was going to go, and a lot of my 4-H and FFA involvement was, my strategy to get into Cal Poly.
Wow, that's really, really neat. What a fun story.
Yeah, I've been very lucky to set goals and be able to achieve them, so it's fun to look back.
I've always been jealous of people who knew exactly what they wanted to do when they were 10 years old. Good for you.
Can I jump in for a quickie question?
Mm-hmm.
Danny, when you decided to go in this type of work, do you find that most farmers today are open to learning about new technologies, or you think some of them are still hard to convince to try new things?
I think one of the greatest things about my job I have now is I can speak pretty candidly to these things, and I would say that the baby boomer generation in ag right now has a hard time being open, and I think that it's primarily just because when you look at how technology changes how you do things, there's big changes that can happen for people, and it can be really scary. And if you spent 30 or 40 years developing these processes that you're doing on your farm, and all of a sudden here's these new tools that are kind of going to completely change how you do things, I don't know that at that point in my career I would be really open to changing what I was doing either. So I think that there's a lot of things that are going on that might be impacting people's idea about technology in ag right now. But I think as generational shifts happen, that a lot of those challenges are going to, become less impactful.
I think also I read somewhere recently that 90% or somewhere in that vicinity, 90% of all the technology that we know today was developed post-1950. So if you take the average age of a farmer today, that puts their, that's approximately when they were born. So in the early 1950s or late 1940s, that's a big technology jump for a lot of folks, especially someone used to working with their hands and producing food, to doing something like you're doing today, using drones and such. So I guess that would bring me to my next question. Last year during the California Irrigation Institute, you shared how you were using advanced technology, like for irrigation management, for example, such as drones. If you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on that to our listening audience. That we hear about drones and on the news, not always in a good light, but I think use of drones in farming is fascinating to me, and I think our listening audience would be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, so I think that the future for drones in ag is very, very bright. But most of what we're doing today, to be completely honest, is definitely at an R&D level. There's some real challenges with drones on a farm like ours. We're a 12,000-acre farm, and we're pretty contiguous. But even to try to do a flight with a drone at under 400 feet for us once a week is an almost unsurmountable, feat. So what we've done is decided to look at really specific cases with the drones, and let's figure out what types of sensors and what types of jobs they can do, with the anticipation that FAA rules are going to change, and the technology is going to continue to improve and continue to cost less. But what we want to do is figure out how these new technologies are going to change how we do things on the farm. So one of the biggest areas we've looked at, because it's a big expense for us in the last 5 years, is drip irrigation repair. 70% of our farm is on subsurface drip irrigation, and we have gophers, you have tractors that maybe the driver turned the GPS off, or you have a number of things that can happen that can nick the tape and cause leaks. Well, once you get a full canopy in the crop, there's no way to go really detect that leak. And even before you get a full canopy, the current practice is have a guy drive around in an ATV and look for a leak. Well, there's a lot of time being spent driving around on our ATVs, and so we decided maybe we could figure out how to target where those leaks are with the drone, somehow send that GPS location to their phone. They know right where to go. Now we've saved a lot of time in terms of our maintenance. We've shifted our strategy away from thermal right now just because the thermal technology is still super expensive and drones crash a lot. So we don't want to put expensive cameras on the drones yet. So what we're doing now is just using simple RGB cameras, or we actually really like the DJI Mavic. It's a little tiny, almost handheld drone, and what we're doing is flying fields pre-season, and then turning the irrigation system on, and then about 4 hours after we turn the system on, going and looking for leaks. And what the drone's able to do is pick up a difference in the dark spot where the leak is at versus the light spot where the dirt is dry. And so we're working on finding some partners to do some machine learning to classify those spots, quantify them, and then create basically a work order where here's 10 leaks in the field. This is based on the wetness area. This is the largest one, so prioritize this one first, and then so on down the line until you get to your smallest area. And the idea is to significantly reduce the amount of labor it takes to maintain the irrigation systems. So that's what we're doing with drones specifically. We're using them a lot for some crop monitoring, but again, these are all very, very R&D-based projects, and most of them involve a lot of correlation analysis. So we're trying to use the drone layer in combination with a number of other layers of data to find positive correlations and find consistencies in primarily our soils. So that's just one area that the drones are playing a role for us. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of new technology coming out every day, and I think that drones are definitely going to play a big role, but unless you have a team devoted just to R&D right now, I'd kind of hold back and wait another 2 or 3 years till the technology advances a little bit more and is ready for kind of plug and play on farms.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I can just imagine all sorts of applications. And actually, I've recently interviewed a farmer in the Midwest who's using drones for irrigation scheduling, for instance, and for also, like you, detecting where there's a problem. In his case, it was clogging. And then after detecting clogging, they were able to remedy the system and watch the crop go green again. So it does work. But there's satellite, there's drones, there's all sorts of different options. So we'll look forward to watching what you guys are doing on the R&D level, and maybe link together to see what's going to be commercially viable. So Danny, in Tulare last week, you also had a very interesting discussion on the panel about kind of what's hot and what's not in technology, not necessarily just irrigation, but information technology and data, and kind of where things are going with how people will buy food. And I think you mentioned some things about Amazon, and I don't know. So can you kind of give us a snapshot of the gist of a little bit of that conversation? I thought it was really interesting, and the listening audience would probably enjoy it too.
Yeah, so in that presentation, what sparked the meat of the conversation was I brought up kind of open source, and that is being something that's hot in ag tech right now. And when I talked about open source, I wasn't just talking about data itself in terms of we want to be able to go in and access all of our tractor data, and we want that to be open. Also, kind of in open source in our process. So not necessarily IP per se, but how we're doing things and how we're looking at things. We're being really transparent about it, and there's a lot of other people out there that have solutions or in other industries that can be related to what we're doing, especially in the GIS community. So I really think that where the future of ag is going and the future of consumers is going is a lot of transparency and the Internet of Things and being able to really understand anything and everything about what's happening in your life. The connectivity of everything in our lives is only going to exponentially grow. So we feel that we want to share what we're doing because we're going to be able to come up with better solutions by finding people who want to also share what they're doing, and together we can come up with better solutions that create, better outcome for end consumers at the end. So when we say open source, we mean we're sharing how we're doing things, and we invite other people to give us feedback. So, our technology engineer has 3 or 4 posts now on Medium about different things that he's done for us on the farm. He's built an app that's on Mapbox, and just finally got our license, so we're out of beta and we're paying, but it's super cheap. And instead of having to print maps whenever anybody comes to the farm now, they can download our app and go see our crop map. So they can go see every field, they can see the crop that's there, and they can see how many acres it is. And that on our farm in the last 3 months has been extremely popular because everybody always just needs to know where they are on the farm. And it's hard to do that on a paper map that you can't see yourself on. So how we did that and how he built that is out there. And we invite people to go look at it, and we invite feedback. We are looking at, in developing our management zones, and the thought process behind how we're using Veris data is one of the layers to do that, and how we're using different components of QGIS, which is a free GIS platform, to build those management zones. Unfortunately, a lot of those types of things are what people are building businesses on right now. So there's definitely pushback in me saying that, I think we should just share everything. It's a pretty progressive mindset, but we feel 10 years from now, that mindset and that kind of not settling for somebody saying that, just trust us, is going to pay off, because we're going to continuously be improving ourselves and continuously finding better solutions. So open source is something that I think is just really important in ag right now, but it is an industry that just it's a foreign concept. We're very secretive. We like to, in general, keep to ourselves, and the neighbor does it his way and I do it my way, and that's just how it is. And we're not really interested in doing anything else. So
yeah, well, most software developers want to get paid for the work they do and the new methods that they create. So this is very unique that you're willing to do that work and then share it for free with others. Way different business model, right?
Well, I think that the value propositions aren't going to be in the algorithms or the processes. They're going to be the ability to integrate it on the farm and actually get the people that are on the farm to use the technology. I think that when you look at software and where machine learning and AI are going, what people are coming up with right now is solutions in our brains, and the algorithms that we're coming up with in ag are just going to be obsolete in 5 and 10 years. So I'm just not, convinced that a business model built on those types of things is going to be super sustainable. And again, I read a lot of books that talk about what's going to happen 10 years from now, and so I look at how we're handling our data and how we're handling our information in that way, and full transparency and people being able to really be connected to the farm. I think is going to be real. We really want. We're marking all of the cotton that comes off of our farm with a DNA tag, so that way we can build the RFID system to the gin. So we're actually going to be able to tag a piece of cotton from the field, the specific location in the field, all the way through the bale of cotton. Now, at the manufacturing facility, we may not be able to get to the point where which shirt, came from which field, but we're getting pretty close. And so we're bringing transparency. We're trying to get to the point where it really is shirt to shirt, and you just have a QR code that you scan at Costco, and here's all the metrics about what it took to grow this cotton.
And people do want to know that now, right?
I think that I believe that people do. I know that me and my family do, and a lot of our friends do. I also think that internationally there's a big demand for safe and high-quality crops. And as California growers, we're subject to the regulations and the progressive legislature of California. And instead of griping about it, I really feel like we should be figuring out how to leverage it in marketing and taking advantage of it. People around the world want to buy things from California because it's safe and it's good quality. You can't say that everywhere else in the world. So creating transparency about things coming from California, I don't see how that's a negative thing for any California farmer.
Yeah. It's a marketing tactic, and use the regulations in a creative way.
Well, and if people in the EU and people in Japan and people in China or people in India, China and India where wealth is being grown faster than it is in the United States, maybe we need to be thinking about those markets a little bit more than our domestic markets, at least in California where we're growing specialty high-value crops. We're not the Midwest.
All right. Well, over to you, Paul.
Speaking of people, you in your presentation at the World Ag Expo last week, you mentioned how children of farm workers are getting educated in the high schools and junior colleges and universities, and then coming back to the farm. Could you maybe help us get a better handle on that? How that's working?
Yeah, so I've been real fortunate through the last probably 3 or 4 years of my career to run into young graduates or young students out of a couple different universities, but for me, UC Merced, just because of the proximity, has been one that I've just gotten a lot of exposure to. And kids that grew up in farm-working families took advantage of being in the top 10% of their high school class, didn't want to go do farm work, ended up at UC Merced because UC Merced is, one of the newer UCs. So that top 10% guarantee, UC Merced is where a lot of those kids go, and they go in, they're getting an engineering degree, and what we're finding is because of their understanding of the work and what ag is at the dirt level, they not only have a good understanding and perspective on how to solve some of the problems, they have a real sense of purpose in solving them too. So I've gotten to meet some really passionate young engineers, environmental engineers, coming out of different universities and who have backgrounds in ag, but are coming in and changing how we're looking at things. And it's exciting because it's the type of energy we need, and they're bringing in new types of competencies that we really need in ag right now. I don't know that we need a whole lot more crop scientists, but, man, we need a lot more mechanical engineers and electrical engineers and data scientists.
Yeah, that was an interesting point in Tulare that you said that, of course, at some point we need agronomists, too, to figure out how to grow the crop.
Absolutely.
But more importantly, you're saying we need people who can build the networks that will capture the data that we're now able to capture on a farm and feed it into the system so that we know during harvest when, the truck is full and, all the logistics and, down to the irrigation management. Who knows? Maybe at some point you're going to be able to see what the irrigation uniformity of the system is, as well as detecting major problems like leaks or clogging. I'm not sure. Where do you think that's going?
It's exciting. I think on the agronomy side, if I'm an agronomist right now, and we're fortunate on our farm, we just hired an in-house agronomist, and he's super stellar, and he's super open to sharing everything he knows. And ultimately, all of the things that an agronomist learns and knows, there's a decision-making hierarchy or a decision-making matrix that they go through to do things. Ultimately, though, their eyes are the sensor that they have that is most valuable for them, because they see things in the field and are able to go into that decision-making matrix and make a decision. So kind of what we're trying to do is automate as much of that matrix as possible for the PCA. So all he's needing to use is his eyes, and then all of the other things that go on in the background, we're helping automate. And eventually the technology will be there to replace the eyes too. So in the agronomy side, we're always going to need really good agronomists and good soil scientists and crop biologists who understand the living systems of the crops that we grow. But their day-to-day decisions on the farm are probably going to end up changing. And instead of every day going out and looking for bugs, they're going to be helping the data scientists and the computer scientists build the neural network to automate the process for the latest sensor that, the new company has put out. So the role is always going to be there. It's just going to change.
Yeah.
And
when you start... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and then mentioned, the irrigation systems and, distribution uniformity. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're real close to those types of things happening. 3 to 5 years, I think there's going to be commercially viable products out there that are, in higher value crops that it makes sense to, make the investment that's going to come with those types of systems.
Yeah. Well, you start talking about neural networks for a farm, and I remember on the panel discussion there was a woman from the Midwest who was kind of, I think this sort of talk scared her, and, felt that it was a threat to the small family farm, and why can't we just continue being small family farms and everybody just leave us alone? But as you pointed out, being left alone has created some problems, right? Which has spawned new regulations, and so we actually need to be doing a little better job of watching what we do.
Yeah, and if we embrace the machines and we ourselves can be agile enough to teach ourselves to control them, they can make our lives a lot easier. They can make our farms a lot better. I try to really have an optimistic. There's definitely people out there when you talk about artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning that get a little leery. But ultimately, there's a human who has to control those systems, and we just need to control them very intelligently. I'm not afraid of it. I'm very excited about it, clearly, but I've also been, done a lot of research into it and read a lot, so it's just not something that's foreign to me. I think that's where technology, this brings up a great point. We've talked a lot about ag tech, and I think that one of the things that I'm learning more and more is that it's not necessarily about ag tech, it's about technology in agriculture, and not just the technology itself, the people in technology. infiltrating agriculture and becoming a part of agriculture operations. So as I think that's going to happen naturally, I think where we are right now is there's a lot of people in technology that have started technology companies and they're trying to sell services to agriculture. And because of that, there's a lot of cultural challenges or just historical challenges in how business has been done, and it's just not meshing. But I think the more that people who are in technology really integrate and become a part of farming operations or agriculture operations, that's where things are going to start moving and where you're going to see change really start happening.
Well, your farm has a over 150-year history of innovation from the time Henry Miller pasted a note on a tree to get the water rights, right? And then canals were built and all sorts of infrastructure upgrades, and so you're unique in some ways. But what I'm hoping is that other farmers will be like you. What are those barriers for other farmers to adopt the technology, and how can we overcome them?
Well, I don't think ag is too different than any other industry. There's early adopters, and then the next 15%, and then the next. You can follow the curve of adoption. In terms of where the hurdles are or barriers, I have to look at not so much what the barriers are, but what's really working on our farm. And what's working on our farm is the people. We have really shifted the organization. We completely changed how, in the last year, we've changed, 50 years of how we ran our organization. We really shifted it quite a bit. We've completely changed the team, and that has been that shift in people and our ability to manage the cultural change too. With everybody's gonna have an iPhone, and yeah, we know where you are. And there's things that we know about you, but that's not why you have an iPhone. Managing those cultural challenges along the way, but it all, I think, comes down to people and your ability to integrate, create buy-in, and then get people to use the technology effectively. That's the biggest barrier right now, I think, for technology and ag is people.
Can I ask a quick question?
Interesting.
Can I ask a quick question? When we're talking about the barriers for other farms, you obviously work for a huge farming operation, and there are smaller family operations going. Do you think a barrier, aside from it's new technology and they're afraid of it, maybe they don't have the funding to do that? Is there opportunities for rebates or anything that like anybody gives out so smaller farms can improve their processing and have a better financial endpoint?
So this is where I think open source comes into play. There's a ton of solutions out there that are free. I mean, Google Suite, we're paying for business Google Suite because we're a large business. But if you're a small business or a family farmer, and you have 2 or 3 employees, or even maybe you have a half a dozen employees, and then your wife who's helping you run the business, Google Suite is the best thing that's ever happened to you because you can now create documents, you can share things, you can create permissions. There's all of these things you can do, and you can do it for free. You can get on YouTube and learn how to do pretty much anything using Google. You can get Google Sheets, all of the things, or you can pay the license for Microsoft Suite every year. So, when you look at the technology component, because we're a big farm, we get to, I don't want to call it playing, but we do get to look at the higher cost research, so the drones, the sensors. But there's a lot of technology out there, too, that smaller farms could be taking advantage of that's free. QGIS is a free GIS tool, and anybody that knows how to use Microsoft Excel a little bit and Google Earth a little bit, with a couple weeks of watching QGIS videos, you could become a pretty good GIS, administrator for your farm. You could create great maps. Mm-hmm. But you have to be willing to take that time to sit down and learn something new.
How can they buy technology equipment like sensors and these things? Are there funds available from somewhere in the state or from the federal government?
There were. There's definitely for irrigation technology. There was SWEEP funding. I'm not exactly sure where the funding is at on that. The last I heard, things aren't looking good for the SWEEP funding, but we've taken advantage of that program. We have a system that allows us to, we have soil moisture sensors, and we've done a bunch of soil analysis to create management zones in a pistachio orchard. And we use soil moisture sensors to irrigate each one of those zones independently and specifically to that zone's needs. And that was partially funded by sweep funding. NRCS always has great irrigation efficiency funding. Local irrigation districts usually have some sort of funding source. So there are other mechanisms for the sensors and kind of the more hardware side of the tech. It's usually just going down to your FSA office or your local NRCS office and asking.
Great.
Danny, if I could ask you a little bit about servant-style leadership. We mentioned it in your introduction, and so in the few minutes we have left, if you could just explain that to our listeners and how you are implementing it on the farm as well as others in the organization.
Yeah, so it's a pretty popular idea. The 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, John C. Maxwell. I read it about 8 years ago, and it really shifted how I looked at how I manage people. And I have, since reading that book and reading a lot more about leadership, really changed my attitude in terms of being a boss. I don't look at myself as a boss in really any situation unless there's just a decision that needs to be made, and the boss is the one who has to make it. But I look at myself as a coach, and most of what I'm trying to do is find people who are not in a position to reach their full potential and create systems where maybe I had a responsibility or I walk into a position where I have responsibility and roles. Let's find people around me that I know aren't reaching their full potential, and I'm going to give them a little bit of my responsibility and build them up. And as you do that, I've never found that I stop finding things to be responsible for. But as you do that, you start building up people around you, and the next thing you know, you have a team of people that are as capable as you were when you started your job 2 years ago. And what does that mean for your organization? And if those people can go then do the exact same thing that you did for them to the people that are now maybe working under them a little bit, you can create a culture where everybody's just trying to help one another. And it sounds a little bit utopian, but if you hire right and you bring the right people in and you really promote a culture that is open and honest, it's a really great place to be. And we've been able to really create a culture like that at Bowles, and I've been fortunate enough to have a boss and a CEO and president at Bowles that he himself is a servant leader, and he does the same thing. He allows us to take on a little bit of his responsibility, and he gives us the freedom to give away that responsibility as we find people who are capable of it. And all the while, we're constantly going and finding other ways, to have more value or find other value propositions for the organization. So it really comes down to putting your ego aside most of the time and realizing that, hey, I'm going to give a lot of what I have to other people. Maybe that's my network, my contacts. I'm going to give that to other people who I know are capable of doing more. And yeah, maybe I'm going to lose responsibility for that, but that just means I can go find something else to do.
That's just so refreshing, Danny. Boy, I wish you luck in expanding that philosophy. And for those who would like to learn more about Bowles Farming and you, how can they find you?
www.bfarm.com, or you can look up Bowles Farming on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. We're pretty active in all three. And you can always email us at info@bfarm.com, and we're pretty good about responding.
All right, Danny, thank you so much for joining us, and back over to you, Rob.
Oh, great guest, Danny. I got to tell you, you got the passion, you got the fire in the belly, and love to have you come back and talk some more. Great, Ingy, and great Paul. So anyway, everybody have a great week. Remember to join us next week, and we'll see you then, or you can see us. And remember, most important thing to do this week is to think blue. Good night, everybody.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5